Russia walked into Ukraine's brilliant trap in Kostiantynivka because what Moscow called a victory was actually a grave they dug with their own hands. Soldiers sent in with promises of backup that was never coming. 3 men go in, none come out, and by the time Putin realized the truth, it was already too late. Stay with us, because what happens next in Kostiantynivka will change how you see this entire war. Welcome, dear friends, to Professor John A.G. If this is your first time joining us here, we're glad you found your way to our little corner of the internet. Now, before we go any further, may I ask a small favor of you? If you find value in the work we do here, in bringing you the truth from the front lines, explained clearly and honestly, would you consider becoming part of our family by pressing that subscribe button? It costs nothing, but it means everything to us. And it helps this channel keep going so we can keep bringing these stories to you week after week. And tell us, friends, from which corner of the world are you watching us today? Drop your city, your country, down in the comments below. We read every single one, and we love knowing just how far our little community has traveled. Now, let's get back to Kostiantynivka. Russia has done this before. Time and time again, the Kremlin makes big claims about winning battles it has not actually won. It talks about capturing land when its soldiers are still stuck in the mud, going nowhere. And in the city of Kostiantynivka, this old trick has come back in full force. On July 3rd, Russia's Ministry of Defense made a bold announcement. They said their forces had taken full control of Kostiantynivka, a key city in the Donetsk region. If this were true, it would be a huge win for Russia. This is not just any city. It sits inside what military analysts call the Donetsk Fortress Belt, a group of strong, well-defended cities that Russia must break through if it ever wants to claim the entire Donbas region. Taking Kostiantynivka would give Russian forces a new starting point. From there, they could push toward larger cities like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, both of which are far more valuable prizes. According to reports, General Valery Gerasimov, the commander-in-chief of Russia's armed forces, personally told President Putin that the city had fallen. He said Russian troops were in full control. And to back up this claim, Russian channels released videos and photos. These showed Russian soldiers standing in the town center, unfurling the Russian flag, acting like conquerors who had just won a great victory. At first glance, this evidence looks convincing. Flags, soldiers, footage from inside the city. What more proof could anyone need? But here's the problem. Russia was not telling the truth, and in some strange way, Russia's own military might not have even known it was lying. To understand this, one has to understand how broken Russia's military command has become. Officers and generals are under enormous pressure to deliver good news to Putin, even when that news is false. Nobody wants to be the one who tells the president that things are going badly. So instead, small victories get exaggerated. Minor footholds get reported as full captures. And somewhere in Moscow, in one of his private bunkers, Putin made genuinely believe that Kostiantynivka now belongs to Russia. But what was really happening on the ground told a very different story. While Russian soldiers were busy filming themselves waving flags for propaganda videos, they had no idea that Ukrainian forces were watching their every move. These Russian troops were not an army in control of a city. They were small groups of infiltrators, sneaking in quietly, taking a few photos, and then crawling back into hiding. They controlled nothing. They held nothing. They were simply performing for the cameras, hoping the footage would be enough to convince the world and maybe even convince themselves. Ukraine did not stay silent. As soon as Russia's announcement went out, Ukrainian officials pushed back immediately, rejecting the claim outright. And as the days of July continued to pass, the real picture became painfully clear for Russia. The city had not been captured, not even close. In truth, something far more dangerous for Russia was unfolding. These soldiers who had crept into Kostiantynivka to pose for propaganda were not walking into a captured city. They were walking straight into a trap, one that had been carefully built and patiently waited for them. A trap designed by Ukrainian forces who understood exactly how Russia operates. Who understood that Russian commanders would keep sending small groups of men into the city, chasing empty promises of glory and reinforcement. None of them knew what was waiting for them in the shadows of Kostiantynivka. And in the next part of this story, the world would learn exactly who had been watching, and exactly what happens to soldiers who walk into a trap they cannot see. While Moscow celebrated a victory that did not exist, something else was quietly unfolding inside Kostiantynivka, something Russia's generals never saw coming. Ukraine did not just deny Russia's claim and move on. They knew exactly what was happening inside that city, because they had been watching it happen for weeks. The truth was almost the opposite of what Russian television was showing. There was no army marching through the streets. There was no real control. What Russia called a captured city was really just a handful of small groups, sometimes only 2 or 3 soldiers, who had slipped into empty buildings and abandoned streets. They took their photos, they waved their flags, then they hid, waiting for orders, waiting for backup that was already too late to arrive. And waiting for them, silently, was a name that would soon become their worst nightmare. On July 18th, a message appeared on telegram from Ukraine's 425th Assault Regiment, a unit known by a shorter, sharper name, Scylla. The message was short, it was blunt, and it left very little room for doubt. Scylla said their fighters had swept through Kostiantynivka and raised the Ukrainian flag once again. The city, they said, was under the control of Ukraine's armed forces. No celebration, no dramatic speech. Just a simple statement, backed by video proof, that told the real story of what had happened to the Russian soldiers who thought they had won. To understand why this message mattered so much, one needs to understand what kind of unit Scylla really is. This is not an ordinary regiment holding a defensive line. Scylla is something different, something far more precise. Their job is not to sit and guard territory. Their job is to hunt, find the enemy, destroy the enemy, then move on to the next target, leaving the actual holding of territory to the infantry units that follow behind them. In simple terms, Scylla are the cleaners. They do not stay in one place, they go where the danger is, deal with it, and disappear again, ready for the next fight. What makes this regiment even more interesting is who actually serves inside it. Many assume a unit this effective must be made up entirely of elite special forces, but that is not the full picture. Yes, some of Scylla's soldiers are highly trained veterans, hardened by years of combat, but many others are simply regular infantry, soldiers who showed a talent for this kind of dangerous, close-quarters assault work. Some are even newer to the battlefield altogether, soldiers who have not been fighting for very long but have proven they have what it takes for this specific, brutal job. This mix of experience is part of what makes Scylla so dangerous to Russian infiltrators. It is not one type of soldier they need to worry about. It could be anyone. A quiet, patient hunter waiting in the ruins of a building, a drone operator watching from above, invisible and silent, a group moving through the wreckage of a street that Russian troops assumed was empty and safe. For the Russian soldiers who crept into Kostiantynivka expecting an easy propaganda mission, none of this was visible. They saw an empty city, they saw abandoned homes and quiet streets, and they believed they were safe enough to take their photos and record their videos for Moscow. They had no idea they were being watched. No idea that somewhere nearby, Scylla was already tracking their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The trap Russia had walked into was not made of walls or fences. Every trap needs a design, and the one waiting for Russian soldiers inside Kostiantynivka was built with chilling precision. Scylla does not fight the way people imagine a battle usually looks. There is no wall of soldiers charging forward, no loud, chaotic firefight in the open streets. Instead, this regiment works like a hunter, stalking prey in silence, using patience and information as its main weapons. Their method follows 3 simple steps. Military analysts often compare it to tactics used decades ago in other wars, but the tools have changed completely. Drones have replaced helicopters, cameras in the sky have replaced foot patrols. Yet the basic idea remains the same. First, find the enemy, then trap the enemy in place. Finally, finish the job. It begins with eyes in the sky. Reconnaissance drones move quietly over the ruined streets of Kostiantynivka, scanning buildings, basements, and rubble for any sign of movement. Russian infiltrators believe they are hidden. They believe the destruction around them offers cover and safety. But from above, very little goes unnoticed. A shifting shadow, a flicker of movement near a window, a group of soldiers thinking they are safe in an abandoned structure. Once a group is spotted, the second phase begins immediately. This is the moment the trap truly closes. Drones are sent in, not just to watch now, but to control the situation entirely. Any attempt by Russian soldiers to move, retreat, or reposition is met instantly with strikes from above. It becomes far too dangerous to run. Some soldiers still try anyway, desperate to escape before it is too late. Most of them do not make it far. The drones above make sure of that. For the soldiers who do not try to run, a different kind of fear sets in. They realize they are boxed in. There is no reinforcement coming. There is no path out. All they can do is wait, hidden in the dark, hoping they are somehow missed. They rarely are. This is when the final phase begins. Sometimes, Scylla chooses to end the fight from a distance, using precise and powerful strikes to eliminate the trapped soldiers without ever stepping into the building themselves. Other times, the approach is more direct. Scylla soldiers move in on foot, covered and supported by drones overhead, entering the same structures where Russian troops are hiding. In these moments, soldiers are either eliminated in close combat or given the choice to surrender. Either way, the outcome rarely changes. A small group of Russian soldiers, sent in under orders to secure a position or capture propaganda footage, ends up erased from the battlefield entirely. Meanwhile, Ukrainian infantry moves in behind Scylla, reclaiming the ground that Russia never truly held in the first place. This is the quiet brilliance of Ukraine's strategy. It is not about massive dramatic battles. It is about exploiting exactly how Russian commanders operate. Soldiers are sent into Kostiantynivka in small numbers, often told that reinforcements are on the way to support them once they establish a foothold. But this promise rarely holds true. Backup does not come, supplies do not arrive. The soldiers are left alone, exposed, and unaware that they have already been spotted. By the time they realize their situation, it is usually far too late. The drones above have already marked their location. Scylla is already closing in. This cycle repeats again and again. Russian commanders send in small units, hoping this time will be different. This time they hope the group will hold the position long enough to claim a real victory. But the outcome rarely changes. Soldiers who enter the trap in small groups almost never make it out. What Russia sees as a slow, grinding advance into the city is, in reality, a repeated cycle of loss. Soldiers sent forward, soldiers eliminated. Territory that was never truly held returning fully into Ukrainian hands. And in the final part of this story, the true scale of this ongoing trap will come into full view, along with what it reveals about the real. By now, one thing becomes very clear. Russia's claim of capturing Kostiantynivka was never really about the truth. It was about the story Moscow wanted to tell. This has become a familiar pattern throughout the war. Russian forces sneak a small group of soldiers into a location. Those soldiers take photos with flags. The footage gets sent back home, edited and shared, and presented to the public as proof of a great military victory. But a flag in a photo is not the same as real control. A handful of soldiers hiding in a basement is not the same as an army holding a city. This gap between image and reality has now been exposed once again, and in a very public way. On July 20th, after roughly 2 weeks of this ongoing struggle inside Kostiantynivka, Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, shared an update that cut straight through Russia's propaganda. According to his report, only about 145 Russian soldiers remained inside the city. Not thousands, not an occupying force, a small, scattered number of men, many of them likely still hiding, still hoping for backup that has never truly arrived. This number tells its own story. If Russia truly held the city, as its defense ministry claimed weeks earlier, the numbers on the ground would look completely different. Instead, what remains is a small, fading presence, worn down piece by piece through the same pattern repeated over and over. Small groups sent in, small groups found, small groups eliminated or forced to retreat. And yet, Russia has not stopped trying. Even now, Russian forces continue launching around 20 assaults every single day on the Kostiantynivka sector. This is not the behavior of an army that already controls the city. This is the behavior of a force still struggling to gain any real foothold, throwing soldiers forward again and again, hoping that eventually one of these attempts will succeed where so many others have failed. To understand just how significant this struggle really is, it helps to look at what this city once was. Before the war, Kostiantynivka was home to around 67,000 people. It was a real, living city with homes, schools, and daily life. Today, it stands as a battlefield, fought over not through massive advances, but through small, brutal skirmishes that repeat day after day, week after week. What makes this story so important is not just what happened in Kostiantynivka, but what it reveals about the state of Russia's military effort as a whole. When a claim of total capture turns out to involve only a few dozen scattered soldiers, it raises serious questions about how many of Russia's other reported victories might follow this exact same pattern. Bold statements, convincing footage, and a battlefield reality that tells a very different story. For Ukraine, this moment represents something bigger than just one defended city. It shows a method that works, a method built on patience, information, and precision, rather than massive, costly offensives. Scylla and the units supporting them have shown that even when Russian propaganda claims victory, the actual soldiers on the ground can still be found, isolated and dealt with, one small group at a time. For Russia, the picture is far less encouraging. Soldiers continue to be sent into a city that offers them almost no real protection. Promises of backup continue to go unfulfilled, and the cycle of loss inside Kostiantynivka shows no clear sign of ending anytime soon. As the fighting continues, the true test will be whether Russia can ever change this pattern, or whether Kostiantynivka will remain another example of a battle fought more in press releases than on solid ground. For now, one truth stands above the noise of propaganda and bold claims. In Kostiantynivka, Russia may have announced a victory to the world, but on the ground, in the ruins of a city once home to 67,000 people, the real battle tells an entirely different story.